No, but we don't really see that. I'll have your ID name across it. We can't have you hanging off the bottom of the screen like a chimpanzee.
Okay. Now, I want to do a little advertisement. These are diamond matches, strike on the box. I've been using them for like 60 years. I used to light campfires with them and everything, and they are have positively the worst quality control on the planet Earth. There's supposed to be 250 matches in there, and probably 80 of them work.
80? That's more than one.
And the rest of them, they have, instead of a regular tip like other matches, they have an incendiary match that when you strike it, it goes off in 360 degrees all over. There are holes in my shirt. You see that hole? Those are what they do. They send holes, and they go flaming all over. They go over to a guest, go over on me, light everything on fire. I mean, I'm telling you, this is the worst quality control on the planet Earth. And these are respected blue diamond matches. Okay, that's all I got to say about that.
Have you thought maybe of buying a different brand of matches?
There isn't one.
There isn't one?
No.
Are you going to tell me the United States is run by the Soviet Union and you've only got one state-sponsored matchbox company?
Yeah. So now here's what I'm going to show you. I shouldn't show you this because
it's classified.
This is classified, and it's not going to be released until the 19th. So today's Friday, it's Saturday. It'll be released on Sunday. And this is...
Yeah. That's serious. Not a mistake of the murders of all on board. Okay.
Right. Now, this is going to be on Robert Steele's website, and I tell the whole story. Tell how it started and how the Zionists have killed 585 people using the Boeing uninterruptible autopilot.
It's easy for you to say.
Good one.
Now this is serious. This is serious.
What?
Well, it's serious. We're talking about dead people, murder.
585 of them. You know, you have all of the MS-370, Malaysian 370. There was 240 there. Then there was Lion Air, 150 or 60 there, and then Ethiopian Airlines. And, you know, this is completely Boeing's fault. Now, they're trying to blame it on the MCAS, which is the anti-stall program. It has nothing to do with the anti-stall program. Anti-stall works in the low-speed regime. All of these happened at high speed. And what they did is they found out a way to hack into the Boeing 737 MAX 8 autopilot and make it go full down. But now, you know, there's two autopilots in all Boeing airplanes. There's the one that they use normally, and then there's the one that used for anti-hijack. And the reason they built that one is so if it was ever hijacked, they could take over control from Boeing and fly it from a little room in there to wherever they wanted. And they made the servo actuators, which actually move the controls, instead of the normal 80 pounds where a pilot could take over in case there was a problem, they set it to 150 pounds, which the pilot can't control. And the reasoning behind that is they didn't want the hijacker to be able to say, okay, take me here. And the pilot just said, no, I can't. I have no control. And then, you know, they fly it into base and capture the hijack. But the problem is the Zionists found out how to hack into the program, and all they do is give it a full down nose command for a plane that has somebody they don't like. Now, you may wonder why they would kill everybody, kill 160 passengers just for one person they don't like. Well, that was so that people wouldn't figure out that they would kill everybody for just one person they didn't like. So that happened on Lion Air, and that happened on Ethiopian Airlines.
Did it happen on 9/11? Did they use that for 9/11?
Hologram. Those weren't airplanes. And people would say, oh, yes, I saw it on TV. I have to tell you, you know, two Boeing 67s, there's 3 million parts in each of those airplanes. So that's 6 million parts. And each of those parts, when it goes into a U.S. certified airplane, a certificated airplane under Part 25, it has to be made in a certificated manufacturer. The FAA goes in, sees their quality control, and they're allowed to make that part. And on that part, they have to have a stamped number. So there's 3 million parts for each airplane, 6 million parts with a stamped number. Now, when the airplane crashes, those stamped number parts are all over the place. But in the case of 9/11, they didn't find one single part of the airplane, and none with the stamped identification. So that was a hologram. And buildings 1, 2, and 7 were all destroyed by a direct energy weapon, of which the secret government, the U.S. Naval Command, based out of Kwajalein Island, they have 13 of them at least. John Walson, my good friend John Walson, has taken fantastic pictures of these things orbiting. I have a bunch of pictures in my hallway. And in addition to that, they have some steel foundries up there. And I say steel. They make D.D, and D.D is the hull material they use for submarines, aircraft carriers, battleships. And, it's much, much lighter than steel and titanium, much, much stronger than steel and titanium. And not only that, this hull material, with a small electrical charge, they can keep the ocean between 5 and 7 centimeters away from the hull, so that we know that normally a hull type of a boat, the limiting speed is 1.34 times the square root of the waterline, which means that most hull-based craft can only go 45 to 50 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour at maximum. But if there's no drag, if there's no water along the side of the hull, it can go up to 100, 125 knots. And you can imagine an aircraft carrier that they launched a few months ago, the Gerald Ford aircraft carrier. It's a mammoth. If you can imagine that doing 125 knots, I mean, it's fantastic. And they say, well, wouldn't the crew be able to notice it? No, they're all commanded to stay below. They cannot be up there on deck when it's going that speed.
Apart from the fact they'd get washed off or blown off, no? I mean,
what?
Wouldn't they get blown off the deck at that speed?
Absolutely. But they don't want them up there to know how fast it goes. And then the crew member says, hey, how come we got to someplace 2 days faster than we normally do? They're not allowed to ask those questions. And if you're in the Navy, you know better than to ask those questions. So they've kept it secret, and those things have some fantastic speed. Anyway, that material is made in orbiting foundries, and it's brought down. It's called D.D, and it's brought down by airplanes that are 10 times bigger than a 747. And I think you were the one that was one of the first to ever notice it, see it.
Yeah, I mean and it landed at Machrihanish, which is going to be a spaceport.
Yeah, and I have the picture you drew on the wall there. So that's the craft. They bring it down, and I sent you pictures of Machrihanish, and there's certainly enough room there for a secret runway.
Well, there are people, locals, who've seen the TR-3B fly in there. All sorts of stuff going in and out of there at ground level. But how they land it and where they land it on, I mean, that seems to be something different.
Exactly.
But Tompkins, what about Bill Tompkins? He's saying that those foundries must be being made in huge craft. Is that bit of a story true?
He's not saying anything. Bill Tompkins is dead.
In the past, when he was speaking. God. Got to be careful with your shrewd wit and genius and modest genius.
Where'd you put my pipe?
I think you put it somewhere flammable so it would soon go up in flames.
Okay, so what do you want to know about Bill Tompkins?
Well, Bill Tompkins, I agree with what you've said that Bill was bumped off. He was allowed to basically tell a story, support NASA's landing on the moon thing, aliens on the moon, therefore there must be things on the moon. But it's a mixture of stories, isn't it?
It's a what?
It's a mixture of stories.
Yeah, it's a mixture of stories.
So let's get the stories right on this one now.
Here's the story. We didn't go to the moon, period. No possible way. I'll give you 25 good, ironclad reasons why we didn't go. But
let's start with one and let's work through them.
Okay, the first one I have to tell you about Randy Walsh's new book. And just a second, let me put my pipe here because I think.
And we also want to talk about Dulcie because you found this mysterious file on your computer. You got the book. That's fantastic.
Now, it's full.
And that's available in the current Nexus, folks. If you want to go to Nexus Magazine, there's a review of that.
He takes apart every single excuse that NASA poses that they went. And the most interesting one is the Saturn V. They never flew a Saturn V. What they used for the public to see was a Saturn I. And the way we could prove it is that it was, I think, 15 seconds behind at 26,000 feet and 73 seconds behind at 80,000 feet. And the reason they know that is a guy got a film from beginning until it lost. You can see it in the sky.
Now we're talking about the Apollo 11 launch, and a cloud layer that the Saturn V was seen to go through.
Right,
it went through late.
It went through late, yeah. So,
what about the 300-foot thing?
The what?
I mean, the Saturn V's 300 foot, whereas the Saturn 1B is half that size.
Is half what?
It's half the size. It's not as long.
Oh, they made it bigger. Yeah, they camouflaged it.
So are you saying the big nozzles were just Saturn 1B engines with a big nozzle?
I don't know whether it was Saturn 1B engines. Randy discusses that in detail, and
I mean, a lot of this is down to cavitation of those big engines. They didn't work. The Apollo 4, Apollo 6, if they'd had a crew on board either of those, they would have been shaken to death, that sort of thing. Is that what we're talking about?
They had that bump start or whatever it was, the thing that...
Pogo
start, yeah. And so then he talks about the Van Allen belt and how there's actually 3 Van Allen belts, and how dangerous it would be to go through the Van Allen belt. He spends a whole chapter on the Van Allen belt and has some really neat drawings. And
but didn't NASA launch the new version, which they launched I think 18 months ago, and they had all the data from the Apollo, knowing what all the radiation was, because they obviously went through and they had all that radiation data out in space and were therefore able to use that data for their future missions, which are going to go back there in 2021. But obviously NASA went to the moon, and they can rely on all the Apollo figures, which is why they didn't have to launch that test vehicle in the first place to find out what the radiation actually is.
Nobody's going anywhere. We're not going in 2021. There's too much radiation out there, and we don't have a way to solve it. ET does, and we can go with ET, but only with them. We can't do it ourselves.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but there's a guy who owns a warehouse, and he sells lots of AMs and Zons, and he's very rich. He's half as rich as he was, and he just said he's got a big space rocket, and he's going to launch this thing, and he's going to land on the moon, and he's going to charge people for it.
Oh, who says that?
The head of some guy called Amazon, Amazon Zon.
You're not talking about Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos.
Yeah. He just announced his big rocket and how wonderful it is.
Jeff Bezos is not a moron. Jeff Bezos is just galactically uninformed. He doesn't know, and there's nobody to tell him that there's radiation out there, and he ain't going anywhere. Now, the funny thing about Jeff Bezos, he says he's going to populate the solar system. He's going to take some Earth bozos out there and spread them around the solar system. What Bezos doesn't know is there's 39 planets other than Earth in our solar system. And they have trillions and trillions and trillions of ETs and humans and everything out there. And they don't need Jeff Bezos to bring a couple of Earth bozos out there and mess things up. We're down here on Earth to learn one thing, and that's to live our lives with integrity.
Yeah. I've got your T-shirt on here, John.
Out greed, yeah. And to express our love to our families each day. So Jeff needs to get informed somehow because he's going to be losing a lot of money.
Well, what about Elon Musk? I mean, he's a pretty smart kid. Surely he knows.
No, none of those guys know anything. They believe in NASA, and NASA's not going to tell them anything. For instance, we pulled a good one on Israel the other day. They were going to go to the moon and put a lander on the moon, but NASA forgot to tell them that the gravity there is 69.71% of Earth. And Israel built a lander on the basis that it was 1/6 the gravity of Earth, and it crashed. They ran out of gas because they're trying to land it, with a gravity almost 2/3 of that of Earth. And they ran out of gas because they're just using too much fuel trying to stay in the air. So they went splat. And
well, a friend of mine called Ken Johnston, who was a astronaut for the Grumman spacecraft, and he trained the Apollo astronauts on how to land the LEM. He has photographs. I think he's going to show these in Manchester in celebration of the 50th anniversary of Apollo. And he says there's an atmosphere in the moon too.
They went.
Ken Johnston, astronaut, infers that there is a...
I think he was a test astronaut.
Yeah, he was a test astronaut for Grumman. And he's got the same name as me, so he must be telling the truth.
So what does he say about...
Well, he says they did land on the moon, and Apollo did that 50 years ago, and everything's fine.
Do you mind if I answer my phone?
Yes, I do mind, actually, but you'll do it anyway. Okay, John, right. The Saturn V dressed up as a Saturn 1B, I don't get it.
Yeah, dressed up as it had to look right, and they did a good job. And it was a good fake. Now, have you seen that WikiLeaks movie going around?
You're talking about the Apollo 11 film?
The stuff shot out at Area 51. Did you see that one?
No.
Oh, come on. On my Facebook page?
My God, I'll have to go there. No, I have missed that. I've been so busy, I haven't... when did you put it up?
A couple days ago. Somebody had a camera out on Area 51 and showed how they filmed the land, how they filmed walking on the moon. And it's absolutely hilarious, Miles, because all the things that we know that they did, they do it in real time. They say, ready, action. And then they start walking at Area 51, a movie camera.
Yeah. But that's obviously before it was all closed off.
It went?
I mean, it was only closed off in the 80s, wasn't it?
What, Area 51?
Yeah.
1955.
But you were able to drive there and say hi and drive out once, you mentioned.
I went out 4 times. Well, I went out more than that. I was caught 4 times. And the 4th time they said, look, this is the last time. Don't come back. And I haven't been back.
Because you were a good boy. And then the next time was with Bob Lazar, but we know all that. Okay, you mentioned about Bill Tompkinson. He was a decent man. who was told by the Navy he can tell us everything, and then they bumped him off.
They
Thinking
wanted
ahead. Well, they knocked him off.
they wanted to be believable, and the only way they could make it believable was to bump him off so that everyone would say, "See, he was telling the truth. They bumped him off."
It's okay, honey.
But that's fair. So what else are we talking about here? I mean, are the foundries that you're talking about up in space, are they the things which were like made way back in the 40s and the 50s and anti-G'd up these big submarine pressure vessels that were made in the United States and then somehow anti-gravitied and welded up on the lunar surface? I mean, what how much of this story's real or bunk or whatever? Is it all bunk? How do they get those heavy platforms that John Walston's talking about and you're talking about up into space?
Well, how did they get the part? They make them up there. They don't make them down here.
Yeah, but how do they? I mean, we've got the space shuttle, which doesn't fly anymore. The United States has got no manned lifting ability at all, we're told. The only people going to do that is Elon Musk, Boeing, and Mr. Amazon. So where's all this stuff coming from?
I see where you're at, Miles. Okay, when the U.S. Naval Space Command started in the late 60s, and it was financed through the fake Gemini, Mercury, and Apollo programs. They ripped about $40 billion off, and that gave them the money to start the Naval Space Command. And it was based at Kwajalein Island in the South Pacific. And you could go to your map and go down to the Marshall Islands and then see Kwajalein. That's where they're based. And today they launch 3 or 4 rockets every month. They have between 1,000 and 1,500 astronauts, current and qualified. Most of them are in orbit at all times. And it's a huge operation. So when President Trump a few months ago said he was starting a space command, everybody wondered, what do you mean starting a space command? We already got one. And we're wondering if he's trying to dovetail his space command into the real space command. And we don't know whether he knows about the real, Naval Space Command, or whether, he's been told, well, let's, start one and then we'll see what we can do if we can get one going. But this U.S. Naval Space Command and all that information is on livingmoon.com. Ron Schmidt has been working on this for at least 15 years, and he's done a miraculous job. And the way we started to find it out is, you'll remember that when the space shuttle used to take off, it took 2.5 days to get to the moon. And
Ron, 2.5 days to get to orbit, to the space station.
Get to the space station. And so
Richard Hoagland explained it was doing a milk round. It was dropping off supplies to other places.
And we wondered, because it only took the Russians 37 minutes to get up and 40 minutes to get back with a Vostok. So we were trying to figure out what the story was. And then we noticed Ron got a hold of a load manifest and noticed there's tons of food. And for the 4 people that were up there, way more than that. And then we noticed that every time the shuttle launched, the Vostok would launch 1 day before. So what happened is, then we noticed that not only did it take 2.5 days to get up there, when they got up there and opened that huge hatch there, it was almost empty. I mean, it was like half full. So we finally figured out what they're doing is they're dropping out parts on the way up. And what the Vostok would do is it would take up a whole load of parts and food, and then they'd load up the space shuttle. And then when they'd start back down, and the reason it took 2.5 days back down is they'd start the whole different orbiting places to, the DEWs, the foundries, and all that, and they drop off this food and all the parts they need on their way back. So Ron's the one that figured that out, and we tried to get Jim Oberg to comment on why it took 2.5 days to come back, and that bozo says, well, they worked 10 days on the ISS, and they were all exhausted, so we gave them 2.5 days cruise rest, or 2 days cruise rest on the way back. We're not slave drivers. That's exactly what Oberg said. The trouble with Jim Oberg, he was so smart, and he had so much data, he thought he could argue anything, and anything except the truth. And so, him and Jay Windbag, Jay Utah, who runs space.com, and there's a couple others. Those guys have been professional liars for NASA all these years, and now we find out that 500 million people live on the moon, humans just like us, but far more advanced, both sociologically and technologically. And there's an atmosphere on the moon, just like I said 20 years ago, and the gravity is 69 point. Okay, so
so right, the thing we're trying to get at is how much of these huge craft that have been seen by John Walston and you're talking about, where the hell did all these things get built, and how did they get up there?
We're pretty sure that they were built at the White Sands Missile Test Range. We think there's a couple of covert. Well, we know there's a couple of covert runways there. They have the space shuttle runway there, but there's other strips that are, we have that way to hide runways with holograms. It works perfect. I mean, you can't see anything. Now,
and that's what they use at Machrihanish, and that's what they use at Red Rock Canyon, just outside Las Vegas. Because a colleague of mine had video of these things flying at huge speeds, just going straight into the cliff.
Absolutely. And, John Andrews, who was vice president of testers, and Jim Goodall, who was in the service, Minneapolis Air Guard for many years, and he's the one that got one of the Blackbirds to the Guard there and restored it after 13 years, then 13 years putting God knows how much money into it and made it absolutely perfect. And the Air Force came and stole it back and uses it for a gate guard at the CIA in Langley now. I mean, just came and got it. They didn't ask for it. They just stole it. So that's the third time that the public has paid for it. They paid for it when it was the Blackbird, when it was originally built, and then when it was stored, and then when they stole it and took it to McLean, built it there. So that's 3 times the public has paid for that stuff. And the Air Force gets away with this. I mean, I don't know how, but most of if you look in the records, most of the commanders, the chiefs of the museum, the Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson, are somehow involved in accounting. And, the Air Force accounting, I'm not sure whether you've heard of The Nation magazine in December, had figured out that the armed forces in the last 20 years had relieved the public of $22 trillion. Now that's T with a tree. That's not billion. That's T with a trillion with a T. $22 trillion from the public. And that's what they call special kind of accounting.
Creative account?
Creative accounting. So they end up as these cushy jobs of the head of the museum, and their job is to let different organizations, museums, have special airplanes. And like that B-17, I'm trying to remember what the name of it was. other airplanes, and they give it to these organizations, and the organizations work their hearts out and money and get them all absolutely beautifully restored, and then the Air Force comes in and steals it. They say, "Well, but we forgot to tell you that's ours." I think it's.
But what about Tompkins? I mean, I'm getting back to this. Where are these structures built?
Okay, now,
I mean, the British are talking about the base on the moon and making creatures for them and things.
okay, who said there's a base on the moon?
My sources in England said they were making these creatures, and that's where in vitro fertilization was created for. So they would make these things, which look like greys, and they'd end up working on the lunar base, unquote. So we've got a lunar base up there. And Ken Johnston gave me a PowerPoint presentation with a whole lot of pictures in it, all black and white, about the Apollo era and all the rest of it. But he showed a picture which had a Jew-shaped shape, and it was something like a weather balloon that they were actually launching from the surface. So he was saying, or going to say, before the interview was pulled, and I couldn't use any of his photographs, that they have an atmosphere in the moon and they were launching a weather balloon.
Okay. I don't know anything about that. All I know and all I've said was the Apollo missions didn't go. Now, if they found a way since then, it had to be with the help of ET, because we did not have the ability to guard astronauts against the radiation. It just can't be done. It has to be with ET help. So if we have a base on the moon, and I don't think we do, that one factor had to be solved, the Van Allen protection from the Van Allen belt. But all I'm saying is the Apollo mission didn't go. Now, maybe there's other missions. Where did they launch them from?
Well, I remember at the UFO MegaCon, Kerry Cassidy asked you a question. I think she mentioned the name Bill Newhouse. Now, I know you disagreed with Bill Newhouse on his principle where they tested the saucers and they were sort of like stuck on a pole with a ball bearing so the thing could fly, but it wouldn't take off, if you see what I mean. They could test the aviation. But he explained to me privately that they landed on the moon with an anti-gravity vehicle, not the lunar module.
Yeah, I never believed Bill Newhouse. He's been here several times. I spent a lot of time talking to him, and I never believed a word he said. And the reason I didn't is because he was the one that was telling me that in 1954, 55, that they were making simulators for flying saucers. And they would put the astronauts in this simulator and make them try and guide it when this thing was, going this way and that way and so on. It's ridiculous. Saucers have their own gravity. You're always standing right up and the gravity is right there. You don't need any simulator like that. It's ridiculous. So you don't need to learn how to fly a flying saucer. That was, Bill House's big thing. And he used to, I think there's videos of him with his brother or somebody laughing about, and trying to make, oh yeah, remember when old so-and-so was trying to do that and making a big deal out of it. But I don't think it happened.
Okay. You've found some photographs on your computer.
Yeah, Dolce has been around for a long time.
You've sent those photographs, and what's the significance of them? This is making aliens in the Dulce base.
Making aliens?
Well, making aliens, whatever these things were on those photographs.
Well, there's aliens. It's an alien base. We work with them. They've allowed us to come in and work with them. And they make all kinds of strange stuff. You have different types of aliens that work there. There's aliens that look like us, but they're a little bit taller. There's aliens that, look like the praying mantis. There's grays. There's all kinds of aliens that walk up and down the hallways there. and do what they do best. And level 7, as you know, is Nightmare Hall, and that's where they attempt to cross humans with animals. And they've got all kinds of things going on there. The base exists; it's been there for a long time. it's still going. I have several confirmations it's there. When Bob Lazar worked at S4, he heard him mention it several times. The word Dulce, and they're going, or they're coming, or we've been there, or something like that. Now, talk about the Dulce War. There was no Dulce War. Now, Bill Schneider, a nice a guy as he was never at Dulce, and he was never in any Dulce War. If he was killed, and I don't know for a fact that he was, I don't know who did it. Now, I have a letter from one of his friends that he absolutely committed suicide. So maybe he committed suicide and he tied himself up and whatever. I don't know what the story is, except I do know that Bill Schneider did not work at Dulce. He never was at Dulce, and he wasn't in a Dulce War. Now, the way the story of the war got going was that when I first met Cherry Hinkle, she was working with a guard there that had escaped, and he disagreed with what was going on there, the fantastic, unbelievable experiments with animals and humans and all that, and he escaped out of there with 7 minutes of videotape of a hallway, 25 black and white photos, and 100 pages of technical information. He went, and his name was, do you remember his name right off? I had it right down here the other day. Whoever.
Val Valerian? No.
No. The guy that Cherry Hinkle, the guy that.
Well, we've got some of the photographs. We've got some of the documents here. I could have a look at that, but I'll leave that for the edit.
Okay,
I'll have a look at them.
The name of the guard. That's okay. I'll remember it in a second. But anyway, he got in contact with his friend Cherry Hinkle, who lived in Henderson, and she wrote to Tom Adams. And in 1987, I met with Tom and Linda Howe and Chris Lambright and a bunch of them up at Crestone, Colorado, and we had kind of a meeting of the UFO enthusiasts to trade information. And Tom handed me the letter from Cherry Hinkle that told all about Dulce, but not the name, and wanted to talk to him about it. And Tom said, John, I don't have time to do this. Would you do it for me? And I said, sure. So when I got back to Vegas, I contacted Cherry and, spent 2 or 3 years with her learning about all this stuff. And one of the things she told me was the fact that he had made 4 or 5 separate containers, boxes, suitcases, whatever they were, waterproof and dustproof and everything. And in each of one of these was copies of the 7-minute videotape, the 25 black and white photos, and the 100 pages of technical information. And he gave one of those 5 containers to each of his friends and said, please keep this. If you don't hear from me on 2 contacts, and he would make a contact every 4 months. If you missed 8 months in a row, that meant that they had captured him, and they were allowed to do whatever they want with the contents. They could show it to the public or hide it or whatever. Now, Cherry got one of those containers, and she hid it in Dolan Springs. Now, Dolan Springs is halfway between here and Kingman, and Cherry and I drove down to Dolan Springs, turned left off the highway, and she pointed up in the mountains exactly where she had buried that container. And I kept that to myself for many years. And it was a few years ago when, or I think 1996, when he missed 8 months in a row, and they made an attempt to find the box. And I think they made 3 or 4 attempts. And I think Bill Hamilton was on at least one of the attempts, maybe more, but they never did find the box. But anyway, when after the first couple of weeks that I met Cherry, she had made a pencil drawing of 5 pencil drawings of those black and white photos, and those were the photos that you have copies of. And she asked me if I would distribute them to my friends, and I said yes, but they're in faint pencil, so I'm going to have to make felt tip drawings of them. So I spent a week or two making very careful copies in a felt tip pen of these drawings. And I think there's 4 or 5 of them. And I took those drawings, made copies, and 1 page of technical information. And I think that's all. And I sent it to my friends and told them what the story was. And those became known as the Dulce papers. And I never signed any of the drawings. The only way I could prove that that packet was mine was the typeface, the typewriter that typed the technical information was off of an IBM executive proportional typewriter, the first of which came out in 1965, and I bought one of the first ones, and I still have it. And because of the typeface and the way that it puts type on that paper proves that it had to be mine, because I'm the only one left with one of those typewriters. So that's how I proved it was. Unfortunately, I never signed any of the drawing, but I have her original pencil drawings and my original felt tip drawings. But anyway, that's the way the story, that's the way that the Dulce papers got into the public, as I sent them.
And that was published in Matrix 1 by Val Valerian, is that right?
Matrix 1 came off, every page came off this desk right here. You see this desk? Every single piece of paper that's in Matrix 1 came off this desk right here. Now,
I understand that Linda mentioned that she was a bit annoyed about that. Sort of like, I think she was annoyed on the basis that it was a breach. They didn't want that information out, and you were a bad boy doing it. No?
Who didn't want that information out?
Well, I think Linda Howe.
What'd she say?
Well, about this meeting, that you'd have these meetings and then you weren't invited back again. Is that right?
And I wasn't supposed to talk about the meeting?
Yeah, I understand. I could be wrong.
Oh, nobody told me that. I had a wonderful time with Linda. She said she wanted to go down. I said, what are you doing after Crestone? She said, I'm going down to Albuquerque to meet with Colonel Ernie Edwards and Bob Collins. And I said, okay, well, I'll drive you there if you want. She said, fine. So when the conference was ended, give me just a minute, I'm going to...
What I'm saying is that this stuff is going on in England, and very similar descriptions of what you're talking about, Dulce, are going on in the labs here in Wiltshire.
Absolutely. No doubt about it. So anyway, Linda Howe and I start driving down to Albuquerque, and we get by Alamosa, and just before we get to Espanola, this was in 1988, 3 F-117As are flying. There's 2 on this side and 1 on this side. And of course, I was familiar with it, but they had just released that to the public. And here they are shadowing me and Linda driving down this road to Albuquerque. I mean, it was so improbable, because I knew that they were based at Tonopah, and what they would be doing on this road following me and Linda was, I mean, just incredible.
I think they were just tourists. They just having a day out from the office.
It's what?
Just having a day out from the office.
Right.
There couldn't possibly be any connection.
So Linda and I get to Albuquerque, and we have dinner with Colonel Ernie Edwards. Now, Colonel Ernie Edwards was the guy that the Air Force assigned to Paul Benowitz to keep track of him and, help him or not help him or whatever. And we had dinner with him, and he had some very nice things to say about Paul. No bad mouthing at all. No, he's a nut. He thought he was on the up and up. The only thing that we could not understand is Paul had some black and white photos of the Arch La Mesa, where the secret nuclear craft crashed. The one that you've heard of, the Cash Landing case.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, that craft, we're pretty sure it was that craft, crashed on the Arch La Mesa. And Paul Benowitz went up there several times to find parts. And the only part that he found in all of his expeditions was one U.S. government ballpoint pen. And that was it. There was nothing else. But anyway, that craft crashed there. And Paul had aerial photos. He had a little airplane he used to fly around and take photos of. He had photos of the Arch La Mesa. And when he'd show it, like when he showed them to me, he'd say, look, that's one of those spacecraft there. And I couldn't see anything. And I'd say, well, you know exactly where it is? Right there. See this down there? I couldn't see anything. So when I had dinner with Ernie Edwards, I said, did he show you those photos? He said, yeah. I said, did you see anything? He said, no. I said, isn't it interesting? Paul sees something there and we don't. And he says, I can't explain that. And at that time, just prior to the time we had dinner there, there had been a blackout in Albuquerque of the FAA radar. And I think it lasted 3 or 4 hours, and it was a big news story. And I asked Ernie, I said, what do you think it was? He says, I think they were bringing a black craft through here and they didn't want you to see it. And I said, now look, Colonel, you're a colonel in the Air Force. How could you be telling me something that there's a black aircraft flying through Albuquerque and that's why they disabled the radar? He said, well, that's my personal belief. So.
And what was it, SR-71 or what?
No, it was flying through. It was flying through the Albuquerque terminal control area. An SR-71 flies at 80,000 feet at Mach 3.2.
Oh.
So they're not going to have that on radar or shut the radar down so they go through it. Now, Albuquerque is a very famous place, particularly in my life, because when I crashed that Bucher Youngman over in Geneva, Switzerland on June 24th, 1961, I caused a lot of damage to myself. I crushed both feet, both ankles, broke both legs in 3 places. I lost all my teeth. I knocked out. I broke both sides of my jaw. I crushed my neck, and that's why I have this tracheotomy scar here. And that's a European cut. The U.S., when they do a tracheotomy, it's different than this one. And other than that, I was okay. But I was in a coma for about 36 hours. And that was when I was going from they pulled me out of the airplane. And I don't remember that. But on the way to Geneva, I crashed at the school boarding school that I had gone to. It's called La Rose, supposedly the School of Kings. And I wasn't going there at that time. I had already gotten out. And the reason I was over there doing aerobatics is I had flown up to Bern for something and come back. And on the way back, I happened to be right over the school. I said, well, I'll do an aerobatic show for them. And the last part of the aerobatic show was a spin to make them think I was crashing. But I misjudged my altitude by 200 feet. I was reading the altimeter in meters and all caught up with, I was 17 years old and full of piss and vinegar and ready to do a show. And I start this spin, and at the second turn, I saw a barn go by, and I'm thinking, God damn, I'm low. About that time I hit, and your mind speeds up so fast when you're in an accident like that. I honestly thought that I had just knocked the gear off and I was going to go back to Geneva and land on the grass strip on just the belly. But they put me in an ambulance, and it was about a 45-minute ambulance ride to Geneva, where the nearest hospital was. And I remember being in that ambulance and floating above my body and looking at myself and saying, I'm hurt too badly. There's no way I'm going to survive this ambulance ride. I'm just hurt too bad. And then, I don't remember anything after that. Anyway, finally get discharged from the hospital, and it was very painful. If they gave me any pain pills, I don't remember because I was in pain constantly. And they let me out about 6 weeks later. I went home. We had a nice house there in a little town they called One. And my dad built a California-style ranch house. And I had a room to myself. And I was recovering. And all I can remember is pain 24 hours a day, no pain pills. And one of his engineers came through to visit, was working on the precursor of the Lear jet. And he had been a Marine on one of the islands like Maduro or one of those islands. And he knew a little bit about medicine. And when he came in my room and got the odor, he went to my dad and said, John's got gangrene. If you don't get him to an American hospital in the next few days, he's going to lose that leg, if not his life. So they put me on a TWA Constellation, flew to New York, changed planes, flew to Denver. And at Denver, I was met with by Dr. Randy Lovelace. Now, Dr. Randy Lovelace in 1947 was a surgeon. He was from Albuquerque. His father had built and formed the Lovelace Clinic in 1902. And right after the Roswell accident, they sent Randy back to Albuquerque to expand the Lovelace Clinic to where they had where they'd be able to do autopsies of the aliens in complete secrecy. Now, at that time, 1947, 1948, is when they started building the Monsanto weapons storage area that was right there on Kirtland Air Force Base and right near the Lovelace Clinic. And they were all connected. They had all these underground passageways. When I went there in 1961, I didn't know any of that. I didn't know anything about aliens. I didn't know anything about flying saucers. And it's too bad I didn't, because it would have been interesting. Anyway, Dr. Randy Lovelace was the head of that operation, and he's the one that did all the tests for the Mercury and Gemini astronauts. He was a very famous guy. And in 1967, he took his wife up skiing at Aspen. And incidentally, I forgot to tell you, when he picked me up in Denver, he had a Twin Beach, and he had a pilot who was dumber than a box of rocks. I mean, this guy was really stupid. And it was at night, and Randy said, you want to fly in the co-pilot seat? I said, yeah, sure. So I went up in the co-pilot seat with this guy who was flying this Twin Beach, and we taxi out from Denver, and we get ready for takeoff, and he's lined up on a taxiway. And he calls for takeoff, and the tower says, do you know where you're lined up on the taxiway? Oh, okay, I'll move. Anyway, we get down to Albuquerque, and I go through, a couple, 3 weeks of, they cured me instantly of gangrene. And I left there, went to LA, and that's another story. But anyway, Randy in 1967 had gone skiing in Aspen with his wife. And when they were done skiing at the end of the weekend, he had to get back to Albuquerque. And there was a storm coming through, and he told his pilot he had to get back. Could he fly him back? And of course, the pilot, being dumber than a box of rocks, said yeah. And he tried to sneak through Independence Pass and crashed. And what's interesting is the next day when the rescue team got there, and I mean, Independence Pass, it took a real hike to get up there, and the weather was so bad, they couldn't take a helicopter. They got up to the airplane, and there's evidence that three people had searched it completely, walked around the airplane, gone through all of, Randy was dead, so was his wife, so was the pilot. They had searched the airplane, searched his briefcase, taken all his papers. There was no indication of how they got there, but they did take all his stuff. So he was so involved in the UFO thing and the ET thing and the alien autopsies that they had to be sure that nothing leaked out to the public. So to this day, I don't know how they got there, but that is a mystery. But the Lovelace Clinic has always been involved in secret stuff, and it's connected with the Monsanto Weapons Storage Area, Kirtland Air Force Base, and of course Los Alamos. So,
well, John, what about the so-called alien autopsy? The so-called alien autopsy. I also want you to talk about Stanton Friedman, the late Stanton Friedman, if you want to.
That son of a bitch, they asked me.
John, he's dead. You're meant to be saying nice, kind things when people die like that. He died at an airport, for Christ's sake. He's only dead a couple of days. Jesus.
It couldn't have happened soon enough. Stan Friedman, they asked me. Several people have asked me if I do I say a few kind words about him. I said, not only no, but hell no. I mean, he spent the last 30 years bad-mouthing Bob Lazar, never took the time to call Bob, never took the time to write him, never time to every time that Friedman was in Las Vegas, do you think he tried to meet Bob? No, he didn't. It was his job, and in case nobody knows, Stan Friedman was a paid government agent. His job was
shocked. What do you mean? That never happens in this business, John. What are you talking about? What are you on?
You're too much, Miles. Anyway, his job was to discredit Bob Lazar. And
a lot more.
I don't have any kind things to say about Stan Friedman, and that's all there is to say about that.
Okay, you mentioned the alien autopsy. The infamous fake film of the alien autopsy. How much of it was modeled on real film, or what?
The whole thing.
And was it done at the where was it done?
I didn't see one part of that film that looked real or was real.
I mean, I've spoken to the guy who faked it. He went to great lengths to put certain traps in that, so people would say, "Oh, that couldn't be right," and then he found that, well, actually, that thing was right, like the curly telephone thing, that sort of thing. So then people would find, that wasn't right, and then they'd find it was right. Therefore, it was real. He thought it out pretty well, Spiros.
You're something else, Miles. I love talking to you.
But I mean, were there actual aliens done in the Lovelace place?
Oh, yeah.
Is that? I mean, tell me more.
Absolutely. I mean, there was underground parts of the Lovelace Clinic that connected to the Monsanto Weapons Storage Area. And when we say Monsanto Weapons Storage Area, you think, oh, they must have stored ammo there. Well, there was a lot more than that. There was UFO parts. There was hospital facilities where they could do the autopsies, all that stuff there. And there was very few entrances. I think maybe 2 or 3. One from the Lovelace Clinic, one from a parking area, and another maybe from Kirtland. But each one had a door that you went in, and there was a little cubicle, and I don't know how to compare it. It's a bit of a little room, maybe 6 by 6, and you'd go in this, open this door, and go in, and the door would close, and there was no door handle, so you couldn't get out. And then there was a little key code thing there. Like, this was in the 50s, and they did have key codes then. We didn't get them until the 60s. But you would punch in like 4 numbers, and the next door would open if you got those 4 numbers right. Now, if you didn't get the 4 numbers right and the red light came on, you got one more chance. And if you got it wrong then, that little cubicle would fill with deadly gas and you'd be dead in 15 seconds. And I actually met a guy who told me exactly what that gas was, and I don't remember what it was. But that's how the security of that thing worked. You didn't get a second chance. You didn't say, "Oh, wait, wait." Oh. So,
So if you were, so how many aliens? Any information on that? How many are you talking? 1, 2, 3, 5? Were they greys, reptilians, mantids, tall whites? What about the tall whites, John?
okay, the tall lights is a different story. That's what's his name? What's the guy's name that wrote that book?
Oh God, Charles Hall.
Charles Hall.
I think so. Yeah.
I loved that book. I loved all three of his books. The only argument I have with him is when he said that he vectored the 707. I think he vectored a F-105 and a 707 or something to land there at, what do they call that place? I'm losing my mind.
S4?
The base, no. The base that's along Highway 95 up to Reno. I'll think of it in a second. Anyway, that's the base that he worked at. And he tells this story about the weather being bad, and he was the only one that could work the radar, and he vectored these airplanes in. And it's so erroneous. I mean, the whole story is so full of bullshit. It's almost hard to believe the rest of the story said, but I do believe it. I just believe he got carried away vectoring these planes in, and he's talking about, and then I had told him to bring it down 10 more feet, and then another 5 feet. I mean, total bullshit. But that's the only thing that I found wrong.
Now, why do you think that the tall white story is right? And what about the tall whites who were all wiped out at Paradise in the California fires?
Okay, let me talk about the tall whites first at this place. Creech Air Force Base, that's what they call it now. And then the original name was Indian Springs Air Force Base, and that's where Hall was stationed. Now, why do I believe the tall white story? Well, number one, the way that he tells it and the descriptions of where they were based match. He said he was at the north end of Dogbone Lake, and they walked several miles up that canyon towards the northwest, which leads right into Groom Lake, and that matches. And then you remember the story of Bill Hamilton calling me a few years ago. I'm thinking, no more than 10 years ago. He was on his way up to take a look at Groom Lake. He used to go up there every couple of months, see what was going on, see if there's anything there. And he said he was going to go to the black mailbox, which was black in those days, and then he was going to stay overnight at Rachel. So he calls me, and this was a Sunday. So he goes up there Sunday night, and then stays at Rachel on Sunday night. Then Monday night, he spends out there, and then Tuesday he calls me, and he said, "You going to be there?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, I'm going to come by there. Something weird happened, but I don't know exactly what." And I said, "Oh, yeah, it'd be interesting." So he and his wife drive here, and that would be, Tuesday night. And in those days, I had a couch there in front of the fireplace, and I said, "Do you want me to do a regression?" And he said, "Yeah, that'd be interesting." Well, what's interesting is Bill and I, regressed other people. I was trained in regressive hypnosis, and we had never thought about regressing each other. But he said something strange happened. I said, "Well, let me take a stab at it." And I didn't set up a recorder because I didn't think I was going to get anything. But his wife took notes about what happened, so I did the regression and got him in, and he tells this story that he and his wife were sitting in the truck. They're facing towards the southeast where the tall grays are, and they're right by the black mailbox, and he sees two like car lights, or like the headlights on a car, coming towards him, and they come faster and faster and faster until. Well, wait. Before I tell you that story, I said, "Okay, what strange happened there?" He says, "Well, we were we were at the black mailbox, and we saw these car headlights coming towards us, and when they went over us, he said I turned around." And they're not there, but there's a 18-wheeler going up that little hill there, and I could see the lights on the back of the truck. and I said, "You didn't remember anything but that?" "No, that's what I remember." So I take him into regressive hypnosis, and I take him about, now you see the headlights. Now what happens? He says it's a saucer. And it parks 50 feet directly over the truck. And he said, "I am standing on the side. I had the door open of the truck, and I got, kind of 1 foot on the floorboard and 1 foot outside, just hanging there. And it pulls me up. Something pulls me up inside the saucer, and a force, not a person, a force." And he said, "And I'm laying down on this real comfortable lounge couch, and there's a tall white there, and he introduces himself as Quaylar. And he said, 'I'm Quaylar. What did you want?' And Bill says, 'What did I want?' He said, 'Yeah, you called us. We didn't call you.' And he said, 'We heard you, saying, you wish somebody would come out there, and so here we are. What can I do for you?'" So Bill doesn't know what to say, and the Quaylar starts telling him, about, where they're from and what they're doing here, and they use this as a stop every once in a while, and they have a base there between Dogbone Lake and Groom Lake, and there's several families there, and da. So anyway, they talk for about a half an hour, and then Quaylar says, "I have to leave now, so you're going to have to get down in your truck." And so Bill gets up and he walks over to the door, and he's looking out, and it's 50 feet down there, and he's going to get creamed if he steps off there. And Quaylar says, "Relax, just step off, you'll be okay." So Bill steps off, and it just floats right down to the truck. And he ends up right where he remembers being, with 1 foot in the truck and 1 foot on the ground, just hanging there, and turns around, and then that 18-wheeler goes up there. That was a false memory. And so then I did this regression. His wife took the notes and everything. It was pretty interesting. But when you say, "What's your evidence for the tall whites?" that would be my evidence that Quaylar, one of the tall whites, had picked up Bill. And
well, I've heard that there was good reason why the tall whites who were living at Paradise were taken out. Do you have any idea why they would be taken out?
Absolutely not. They're, the way that Hall tells it, they were a peaceful group. They were scared of humans. I don't know. I doubt whether they were taken out, because I'm sure they have a protective forces, but I don't know. And you're the only one that told me the story about. Now, are we talking about Paradise, California?
Yeah, we're talking about Paradise, California, and the some kind of directed energy weapon was used in that area, but not necessarily everywhere.
Okay, I don't know too much about that, or anything. I don't know anything about that.
Well, apart from the kind words you have for Stanton Friedman, and it's great to see you. Finally, about these lunar bases and how we got up there, anniversary of Apollo. I mean, what's your last word on that before we say goodnight?
Which Apollo?
Well, yeah.
So,
I think you've said it.
Okay, now, you remember that picture right there?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Now, this is the one that I put on my post, and this is when they were digging the subway.
Okay.
And you see the fake
Could you
casino.
identify that first picture so people know what it is? The first picture you held up. That's the casino?
That's today's paper in the Review-Journal.
Okay.
Reason I'm showing you that is it says Resorts World has a new president, but they showed the current construction of the fake casino. Now, the fake casino was built by Boyd Gaming,
And
who was
we talked about that in our last interview when I was with you in Las Vegas, okay? Just for people's reference.
okay. So then here's the picture of the fake casino as it stands now, and I think I told you that when they bought the casino, it was a year and a half delay getting started. And I told you I didn't know for sure, but I thought that Boyd Gaming might not have told Resorts World that it was a fake casino to hide the subway construction. And when Resorts World started getting ready to continue the construction, they found out that it had not been built to code, and it took a year to get it all into code so they could go ahead and finish it.
But that subway, remind people what that subway is. It's to a new base way up
On
north.
Paiute, and it's more secret than Groom Lake, and you will never hear anything about it. I watched it being built, and it's huge. And those subways take 2,500 people up in the morning. Well, more now. That was 20 years ago. And not only that, but they had to build a new terminal. You know, I told you they had the one at the Bellagio, and they had one at Luxor. Now they've got one at Aria because there's so many people. They needed several other places to park all those cars. So they built the new terminal at the underground secret terminal at Aria. So.
Yeah, but John, you gave me a map. You showed me a map with a big circle on it. And if it's really secret, surely that secret map with the secret circle on it shouldn't show something secret at all because it's a secret.
No, that's how you keep things secret, is you don't put restricted area. And that's the mistake that the secret government made when they built the secret runway up at Ferber Flats, which is just 44 miles south of Wendover, Utah. And that's the way I found it. First of all, I heard a report of a guy was hunting deer up there, and he got close to Ferber Flats, and he saw these white SUVs trying to track him down. But he was an Air Force. He was a veteran in escape and evasion, and he eluded them. But he knew that something really restricted there. So then that tipped us off. So then the next thing that happened is a couple months later, the Air Force didn't have to do this, but the secret runway, Ferber Flats, is right on the edge of a MOA, military operating area. And the Air Force went to the FAA and asked to extend that MOA out for 10 miles because they had extra F-16 training to do. Now, if I ever heard a bullshit excuse, it was that. But what they did is they included a map of the extra 10 miles, and all that did was include Ferber Flats. So that told us exactly where it was and that it was there. So when you have a secret base, one thing you don't want to do is put a restricted area around it. There's one on Lake Mead over where I had my Gold Butte. It's in Lime Canyon. And that's a helicopter secret base, and I heard it being built for 2 years there. And I heard the dynamite explosions where they were going into the mountain, and I was the only one authorized to have dynamite out in that area. So whoever it was, and the Air Force doesn't ask for any authorization. They just do it. And but I heard it, and I kept track of the explosions, and I knew what was going on. So it's out there. I've looked till I'm blue in the face at the Google Maps or Google Earth photos But and I can't find out where it was, even though I know where it is within about 5 miles. But someday we'll find out. Someday we'll get somebody who knows about it. The problem is, in 1990, there were so many stories. I was coming up with so many stories that they had to put an end to it, and they increased their security drastically. And what they did is they started giving lie detector tests to everybody that not only worked at the test site, but that worked at Lawrence Livermore and Los Alamos Labs. And the first question in this lie detector test was, do you know John Lear, and what is your relationship with John Lear? So that.
Yeah, but John, you don't tell anybody anything. You just tell a couple of people on a private Skype or phone call.
Yeah, well, somehow they must have had an inside track.
You mean somebody else could be watching this now?
Yeah, 30 years ago, I had that little piece of paper that California put in all cable TV boxes. And it said it's illegal to use a cable TV to look into a person's home, because people think that, it's a TV. Well, they can't use it as a camera. Yes, they can. It works exactly like earphones. You can use earphones as a microphone, and they can use cable TV to look into your house. And California forbid that, of course, like they're going to pay attention to it.
Well, okay. Well, one last thing. Anything else to say to your fans, and any other individuals that you might want to mention?
No, I can't say it's been a pleasure, Miles, because like a trying interview. You're always trying to trip me up. You've always got that trap that is put out there, just waiting for me to say something.
Me? Let's do a thing like that.
It's great talking to you.
Okay, happy days.